saw the girl just standing there, flower in hand, ribbon in hair, and I waited for my chance to make my move. As I made the walk and I got near, I could feel the sweat dripping down my rear, and I really felt I had a point to prove. Suddenly I was at her side. I tried to speak but my tongue got tied, and the only words I could muster were, "Your ass is big." Then once I'd realised what I'd said, I pondered, do I stand and beg, or do I walk away before a bigger hole I dig? Somehow I always find myself rejected. In my head I'm a good old-fashioned Romeo. My charms aren't quite as smooth as I suspected. Turns out I'm a less than average Joe. So I turned around and walked away. I knew I'd have to play the waiting game if I was ever going to turn this sweet girl's head. I daydreamed about our next encounter, envisaged ways I could get to mount her, and thought up lines that would get her into bed. I thought up classes like honey pie, you look so sweet and you caught my eye, and I'd really like to take you for a drink. I may not be a wealthy man, but for you I'd do everything that I can in every single way you could ever dream or think. Somehow I always find myself rejected. In my head I'm a good old-fashioned Romeo. My charms aren't quite as smooth as I suspected. Turns out I'm a less than average Joe. I walked to the station to catch a bus. I didn't need to take a second look to know that the ribbon-haired beauty was stood there too. From the very moment she caught my eye, I knew it was now do or die, and die didn't want, so I knew that I had to do. So I strolled along with a swaggering strut, and my body in front of hers I put, and I looked her in the eye and we both just smiled. I practiced my lines 100 times and I knew them clearly in my mind, and I knew that this moment would make all that effort worthwhile. So I opened my mouth and the words came out, but they weren't the words I dreamt about. They started off with, alright. But things weren't so alright, not even quite, as I started to shake and my fist clenched tight. I stood there looking like I wanted to fight. The girl got frightened and started to scream. This didn't happen in my dream, so I tried to reassure her and make her calm. She continued to scream and I started to struggle. My mind became confused and muddled, so I covered up her mouth with my open palm. Somehow I always find myself rejected. In my head I'm an old-fashioned Romeo. My charms aren't quite as smooth as I suspected. Turns out I'm a less than average Joe. A few days later, after the judge had heard her, he sent me down for attempted murder. If only he knew of my initial plan. If only he knew that my thoughts weren't psychotic. If anything, they were quite erotic. It just turns out I'm not a ladies' man. So I urge all men that if you have any sense, if you see a lady, keep your distance. It's really not worth the pain you go through. It might seem hard at the time, but believe me when I speak my mind, it's a heck of a lot less painful than what blokes in prison do. Somehow I always find myself rejected. In my head I'm a good old-fashioned Romeo. My charms aren't quite as smooth as I suspected. Turns out I'm a less than average Joe. Somehow I always find myself rejected. In my head I'm a good old-fashioned Romeo. My charms aren't quite as smooth as I suspected. Turns out I'm a less than average Joe. Somehow I always find myself rejected. In my head I'm a good old-fashioned Romeo. My charms aren't quite as smooth as I suspected. Turns out I'm a less than average Joe.